The weight I carry isn't just the gear, it's heavier. It's the memory of that fire years ago, the one where the engines got there too late. I still see it sometimes, a flash, a family huddled together against the flames, their screams. I was just a kid then, couldn't do anything. But that image, it's burned into me. It's why I do what I do, why I'm so meticulous, maybe even obsessive about being a firefighter. It's a constant reminder that life is fragile and every second counts. That fire, it's always there, pushing me. Emily, my wife, she's the opposite. She's my anchor. She craves peace, stability, the kind of quiet life that feels a million miles away from my job. She has these gentle eyes, but I see the worry in them, a little tremor sometimes. This new neighborhood, this new house, it was supposed to be our fresh start. The houses here are beautiful, all modern lines mixed with this classic, almost old-fashioned charm. Big green lawns, the kind you see in magazines. It looked perfect, like something out of a dream. We didn't know then that the dream was a carefully constructed facade. It all started with Karen. Not just a neighbor, but the HOA president. Self-proclaimed, of course. She showed up on our very first day while Emily and I were tidying up the front yard. She looked like she'd stepped out of a catalog. Early 50s, blonde hair that didn't move, bold red lipstick, and a face that was carefully made up, but couldn't hide this sternness. She was wearing this sharp red blazer like she was about to sign some $1 million deal, and she was holding a stack of papers. She stopped at our gate, cleared her throat, and her voice was pure authority. "Hello," she said, and it wasn't really a greeting. "I am the president of this neighborhood's HOA. I'm here to inform you that all residents are required to join." She held out the papers, and there was this tiny, almost imperceptible lift at the corner of her mouth, like she was already certain I wouldn't refuse. It wasn't just her words. It was her eyes. Sharp, like a knife, and full of this control. I glanced at the forms, but I knew instantly I wasn't going to sign, and as she accidentally brushed against a new flower that Emily had planted and crushed the petal, a smirk on her face showed. What I didn't fully understand then, but I was starting to sense, was the fear she inspired. The other neighbors, the few we'd seen, they seemed to shrink away from her. A quick wave, eyes down, a mumbled "good morning" that barely made it out. It wasn't friendly, it was cautious. Like they were afraid of being seen talking to us, the newcomers, the ones who hadn't yet learned the unspoken rules. It was more than a welcome, more like warnings. It gave me chills. The perfect neighborhood, the perfect life. It was all starting to feel very, very wrong. I glanced at the stack of papers Karen held, then looked directly into her eyes. That controlling gaze was unsettling, but I wasn't about to be intimidated. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice polite but firm. "But I have no intention of joining the HOA." Her carefully constructed smile vanished instantly. It was like watching a mask crack. "You don't have a choice," she stated, her voice losing its sugary coating. "HOA rules are mandatory in this neighborhood. The previous owner must not have informed you, but if you refuse, life here will be very difficult for you." I crossed my arms, my firefighter instincts kicking in. Assess the situation, remain calm, don't escalate unnecessarily. "I did thorough research before buying this house," I replied, my voice still even. "Nowhere in the contract does it state that HOA membership is mandatory. I think I'll be fine without it." A flicker of something, surprise, disbelief, crossed her face. It was as if she couldn't comprehend that someone like me could afford a house in her neighborhood. "Oh," she said, the word dripping with condescension, So you actually bought this house? That's right, I confirmed, refusing to let her get to me. This is my house, and I have no interest in joining your organization, ma'am. Karen's face stiffened. I could see her nails digging into the palms of her hands, the knuckles turning white. She stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to figure out if I was serious, if I was deliberately provoking her. Finally, she let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound completely devoid of humor. She snatched the documents back. "You'll regret this decision," she said, her voice low and dangerous. It wasn't a prediction, it was a promise. And with that, she spun around and marched away, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement, a staccato rhythm of impending trouble. I watched her go, then turned to Emily, who had been quietly observing the whole exchange from a few steps behind me. We didn't need to say anything. We both knew we'd just made an enemy. We'd poked the bear, or rather, the perfectly coiffed, red lipstick-wearing hornet. "Well," I said, trying for a light tone that I didn't quite feel, "that was interesting." Emily gave me a worried look. "Mark, I don't like this. She seems intense." "Intense is one word for it," I agreed, running a hand through my hair. "But we're not doing anything wrong. We have a right to live here, HOA or no HOA." But even as I said the words, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Karen didn't strike me as someone who gave up easily, and her parting words, "You'll regret this," echoed in my mind, a chilling premonition of the escalating conflict to come. The seemingly idyllic peace of our new neighborhood had been shattered, replaced by a silent, simmering war, and I had a feeling it was only going to get hotter from here. The transition from a peaceful new beginning to a brewing conflict was complete. The stage was set for Karen's retaliation. The following days were a masterclass in passive aggression, orchestrated by the maestro herself, Karen. It started subtly, then ramped up with the precision of a well-oiled machine designed to break my spirit. My inbox became a battleground. Emails from the HOA, each one more absurd than the last, started flooding in. "Your grass is over 3 inches long, cut it immediately." I measured it, 2.75 inches. "Your trash bin is in the wrong position. Move it within 24 hours. It was exactly where the city regulations specified. "Your car is parked incorrectly. It may be towed." I was parked perfectly within the lines, on my own property. I stared at these messages on my phone, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. It was so petty, so childish, it was almost comical. Almost. But the constant barrage was wearing me down. It was like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And it wasn't just digital harassment. Every morning, when I went to get the newspaper, I'd find a new warning letter shoved under my door. These weren't friendly reminders. They were printed on thick, glossy paper with bold ink, as if to emphasize the HOA's watchful, ever-present eye. Karen was making my life a living hell, one ridiculous rule at a time. Then came the fine. A thick envelope, official-looking, with a 500 fine notice slapped across the front. Violation, door color, not compliant with HOA regulations. Penalty, $500. I stared at it, dumbfounded. The door? It was the original paint from when we bought the house. We hadn't changed a thing. I let out a bitter laugh. This wasn't just ridiculous. It was outright provocation. Karen was testing me, pushing me, seeing how far she could go before I broke. She thought I'd be scared, that I'd just pay up, be a good little sheep. She was wrong. I crumpled the notice and threw it in the trash, my jaw tight with anger. Just then, Emily walked into the living room, saw my expression and the crumpled paper. "What's wrong, honey?" I pointed to the growing pile of HOA letters on the table, my voice laced with frustration. They're at it again. Emily picked up one of the letters, read it, and sighed wearily. Can they even do this? We never signed up for the HOA. Exactly, I said, my fists clenching. But she doesn't care, she just wants control. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. I knew she didn't want a war with the HOA, but I couldn't back down. Not now, not ever. This wasn't just about a stupid door color or a misplaced trash can. It was about principle. It was about not letting someone bully us in our own home. A few days later, I was watering the plants in the front yard when Karen reappeared. She didn't knock, didn't wait for an invitation. She just marched straight into my yard like she owned the place. Today, she was even more extravagantly dressed than before. A sleek black blazer, her high heels clicking on the pavement with an air of undeniable arrogance. But it was her smile that was most unsettling. Faker than ever. "Mr. Mark," she drawled, her voice smooth but laced with a calculated malice. "I think it's time you understand that no one can defy the HOA." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. Slowly, I set the watering can down, wiped my hands on my pants, and met her gaze directly. "I never signed up for the HOA," I repeated, my voice steady. "You have no right to enforce anything on me." The smile stayed plastered on her face, but I saw a flicker of something dark, something dangerous in her eyes for a split second. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head with a feigned regret. "The HOA is the law here. If you don't comply, there will be consequences." Her voice no longer bothered to hide the threat. I smirked, a cold, humorless expression. "I don't care. Perhaps you should try to follow actual laws instead of your damn HOA rules." That was it. The mask finally shattered. Karen's smile vanished, her face turning a mottled red. Her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I could see the muscles in her jaw working, as if she was struggling to contain an explosive rage. She took a step closer, her eyes blazing, like she wanted to physically attack me right then and there. The carefully constructed facade of civility had crumbled, revealing the raw, unrestrained fury beneath. The tension between us was thick, palpable, a silent battle of wills that was about to erupt. "You will regret this decision," Karen hissed, her voice stripped bare of any pretense of politeness. It was sharp, filled with a venomous resentment that sent a shiver down my spine. I crossed my arms, meeting her glare without flinching. "I guess we'll just have to wait and see who regrets it first." Karen took a deep breath, visibly trying to regain her composure, but the fury was boiling just beneath the surface. Finally, she turned and stalked away, but not before casting one last defiant glance back at me. It was a look that promised retribution. Emily came out of the house just as Karen disappeared down the street. She looked at me, her face etched with worry. "I don't like this at all, Mark," she said softly. I sighed, pulling her into a hug. "Neither do I, but I won't let her bully us." Emily nodded, but I could feel the tension in her body. We both knew, without saying it, that this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down. And the HOA nightmare was only just beginning. We tried to go back to normal, but the underlying tension was always there, a constant hum of anxiety beneath the surface of our lives. A few days later, it happened. I was on my night shift at the fire station, catching up on some paperwork. The station was quiet, the usual lull before the storm, although we didn't know a storm was brewing, not in the way it was about to. Then the phone rang. It's never good when the station phone rings late at night. My colleague, Jake, picked it up. I heard him say, "Address, Yes. Okay, we're on our way. He hung up, his face grim. Fire, he said, his voice tight. Big one, in your neighborhood, Mark. My blood ran cold. My neighborhood. Emily. I felt a jolt of pure terror, a primal fear that ripped through me. We scrambled into our gear, adrenaline pumping, and raced to the truck. The siren wailed, slicing through the silent night, a desperate cry in the darkness. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my heart hammering against my ribs. Fire waits for no one. It consumes everything in its path, and every second was agonizing. I kept thinking of Emily, alone in the house, so close to the reported location. She must be terrified. The orange glow in the distance confirmed it. This was a bad one. My team was focused, ready to battle the blaze, but as we approached the scene, a figure suddenly darted out into the road, waving their arms frantically. It was Karen. She stood there, in the middle of the street, like a deranged traffic conductor, her face contorted with rage. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching in protest, the truck coming to a jarring halt just feet from her. The burning house was only a few dozen houses away now, the heat already radiating through the windshield. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice shrill and filled with authority. "You are disturbing the peace of the neighborhood." I couldn't believe my ears. I rolled down the window, my face burning with anger. "Karen, we are responding to a fire. Get out of the way now." But she stood her ground, arms crossed, a mocking smirk on her face. "What do you think, I'm stupid? There is no fire here. You're just using this as an excuse to destroy my HOA." My heart was pounding with a furious rage. Every second we wasted was another second the fire had to consume, to spread. Even if she was blind, she should be able to see the flames, feel the heat. I tried to keep my voice calm, but my eyes were blazing. "Karen, if you don't move aside, at best an entire house will burn down. At worst, someone could die." She didn't budge. Her eyes gleamed with an insane level of obstinacy. It was as if she was deliberately ignoring the reality of the situation. And then, she pulled something out of her pocket, a strip of sharp metal spikes. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" I yelled, horrified. She didn't answer. With a flick of her wrist, she scattered the spikes across the road, the metal glinting menacingly in the flashing lights of the fire truck. The entire crew inside the truck was in disbelief. This wasn't just obstruction. It was deliberate sabotage, a criminal act. "If you can't drive past," she said, her voice chillingly calm, a triumphant smile spreading across her face, "then you won't be able to interfere either." This was beyond anything I could have imagined. This was pure, unadulterated madness. I immediately grabbed the radio and called the police. I was going to put an end to this, one way or another. The fire, the lives at stake, Emily. Everything was secondary to stopping Karen, right here, right now. The line between a neighborhood dispute and a potentially deadly situation had been crossed, and the consequences were about to become devastatingly clear. Within minutes, sirens wailed again, this time belonging to a police cruiser. An officer, his face a mask of disbelief and anger, jumped out and surveyed the scene. The fire raging in the distance, the fire truck blocked, Karen standing defiantly in the road, and the scattered tire spikes. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. Karen, though slightly startled by the officer's arrival, maintained her arrogant demeanor. She flipped her hair haughtily. "I'm just ensuring order in my neighborhood," she declared. "The firefighter is exaggerating." The officer narrowed his eyes, his hands clenching into fists. "Do you realize you're obstructing a fire truck? This is a criminal offense, ma'am." She shrugged, unfazed. "Don't make a big deal out of this, officer. Mark is just making an excuse to use the emergency vehicle to go home. Don't let him fool you." I nearly lost it then. Her insane, absurd reasoning, her complete detachment from reality, fueled by her hatred for me, it was beyond comprehension. The fire, growing ever larger in the background, made us all desperate. The officer, thankfully, had no time for Karen's delusions. He stepped forward, pulled out his handcuffs. Karen's face began to change. No, you can't do this. I'm the president of the HOA. And you just obstructed emergency services. You are under arrest." He said it, and this time she seemed to realize that he meant. Only after the road was cleared, the spikes painstakingly removed, could we finally advance towards the burning house. But when we arrived, my heart sank. It was almost completely engulfed in flames. We managed to get the fire under control, preventing it from spreading to neighboring houses, but the damage was catastrophic. Fortunately, there were no casualties. The occupants had escaped, but the house and everything in it was practically gone. The owner of the house, a man I'd never met before, collapsed onto the grass, sobbing uncontrollably. The police explained to him what Karen had done, how she'd delayed the fire truck. He looked up at her, his eyes wide with shock and a growing, incandescent rage. He staggered towards her, his face contorted with grief and fury, grabbing her arm. His eyes were bloodshot, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "What have you done?" he choked out, his voice trembling with disbelief. Karen, now completely pale, her lips trembling, stammered incoherently. "No, it can't be." Then the final blow, delivered not by me but by her own son. He had just arrived. "You blocked the fire truck because of your stupid HOA rules. You destroyed my house just to show your power." She went back and started saying, I didn't know. But it was useless. A police officer stepped forward, his voice cold. "You are under arrest for obstructing emergency services and endangering the community." Karen screamed, struggling. "I did nothing wrong. You stopped the fire department." The officer cut her off, his voice like steel, and as a result, a man's house burned to the ground. Karen froze. The devastating reality of her actions, the full weight of the consequences, finally crashed down on her. Karen froze. She looked up, her eyes hollow, as if the weight of the world had just collapsed onto her shoulders. The truth, stark and undeniable, hit her like a physical blow. Her hands trembled as she stared at the smoldering ruins of what was once a home, a life, reduced to ashes because of her actions. All her arrogance, all her self-importance seemed to drain away, leaving behind a shell of a woman, small and utterly defeated. For the first time, Karen looked truly powerless. For the first time, she was the one out of control. In the holding cell, Karen tried desperately to cling to some semblance of her former self, to the delusion that she was still in the right. She crossed her arms, lifted her chin, and declared to the officer processing her, "I did nothing wrong. I was just enforcing HOA rules. This is all Mark's fault. He didn't explain clearly. He never told me the burning house was my son's." She nearly screamed the last sentence, her voice cracking with a mixture of desperation and denial. There was no remorse in her, only a desperate attempt to shift the blame, to escape the crushing weight of her own responsibility. The officer sighed, a weary sound that spoke volumes about the countless similar cases he'd seen. He slammed a stack of photos and the fire damage report onto the table, the sound echoing sharply in the small room. "Do you not realize how disastrous your mistake was?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Look, you destroyed everything, your son's house, all his belongings. He was lucky to escape. If he hadn't run fast enough today, your blind, foolish arrogance would have killed your own son. The officer's words struck Karen like a physical blow. Each word was a hammer, shattering the last vestiges of her denial. Her face went rigid, her eyes becoming distant and unfocused, the reality finally sinking in. She was being consumed by her own regret, unable to argue, unable to resist. Karen's actions had led to irreversible consequences. And although her son didn't press charges against her, but the court still convicted her. She was sentenced to a year in prison for obstructing emergency personnel. At the trial, she sobbed like a child, a broken, pathetic figure, completely unlike the imperious HOA president she had once been. She turned to look at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and lingering blame. I was certain that, deep down, she still clung to the idea that it was somehow my fault, that I had forced her hand. I didn't return her gaze. She would have to pay for her mistakes. Hopefully, this punishment would change her, but I doubted it. What do you think will happen after? I don't know. I don't even know if I care. The scars of that night, both literal and emotional, will take time to heal. The smell of smoke still lingers in my memory, a constant reminder of how close we came to losing everything. Emily and I are trying to rebuild, to find some sense of normalcy again. But the shadow of Karen, the shadow of the HOA, still hangs over us, a chilling reminder of the destructive power of unchecked ego and the devastating consequences of blind adherence to rules, no matter how petty. Perhaps the HOA will change. Perhaps someone new will take over, someone with a sense of reason and compassion. Or perhaps not. The ending, like life itself, is uncertain. The only certainty is that the fire and Karen's actions changed us all, forever.